Hey guys, it's Damian Stevens, and I'm so glad to be here with you. More importantly, I am really glad to have the one, the only, the amazing Jeffrey Newton.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. I'm excited to be back again. The time disappears so fast in between these chunks, but the good
It
news
does.
is then we get a lot of context to unpack for the audience.
Yeah, that's true. There's been some really interesting breakthroughs, since we've talked last. And we titled this in a way that kind of curious to see who engages on this, right? But 100x
Yeah.
hire and hiring and understanding people has all been I would say an obsession probably for mine. And
Mm-hmm.
we've managed to hire some people that are incredible, both in just as an individual, but also from a performance level. And with this, but this time is a little bit different, not only because AI is so new, but kind of called this 100x hire. So we'll kind of get into the details. What are you most excited to talk about today?
For me, it's probably unpacking. I don't want to call them maybe like what your false assumptions were or your false beliefs kind of going into this process, but the things that you have either been most surprised about or um, I always kind of default back to the 4 minute mile thing. Like, what are the things that have broken the 4 minute mile for you? Like, you didn't know that it was possible before, something that now you've experienced going through this process of hiring your very first AI ops style role, where you can't walk yourself back from the new version of reality, right? Like, you can't unsee it. You can't not know it exists. And now you're, as a result, that much more interested in leaning in to the curiosity of finding more and more of that uh, opportunity in your space.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I call what we're doing now building it open, right? We're talking about it, but we share everything from the job description to the pay
Mm-hmm.
range to can we get the kind of person we think we can get in
Yeah.
this budget, right? Because you just described a certain person in a certain way, and they're a 500,000 a year person
Mm-hmm.
versus 100,000 a year, or whatever that may be. And so come through this and expecting really good and interesting things. And I can say that I've done about we've had hundreds of candidates, just to give an overview, hundreds and hundreds of applicants. I've done over 30 video calls. So that's not the whole process. There's a lot of steps in between
Mm-hmm.
there. But there were 30 that were so good. We've got to
Yeah.
speak with them. And that led to some memorable moments.
Mm-hmm.
There was one in particular, memorable in maybe the way in the wrong direction, where
Yeah.
their resume was so tailored to what we do that they literally were using the exact same words. Like, I've
Mm.
done this, and just we had worded things in the job description very unusually, and it was
Sure.
worded the same way. And look, I give you points for using AI to change your resume, but there's a point where it's like, I'm not sure if you read that. More importantly, when this one particular candidate, I challenged them. How did you do this? How did this work? Tell me about that. And it was clear they didn't
Mm.
actually do that. So I think it's, that's one of the things. Like, we're going to talk about the 100x hire and all those things. There's pros and cons, right? There's ups and downs. And as humanity, there'll be those sort of things that we need to grapple with, including seeing
Mm-hmm.
where I think somebody, perhaps inadvertently, overstated their capabilities.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Never in an application or a job interview.
yeah,
Maybe there is something there to unpack, though, only because it's recent and because you had the volume, if you will,
yeah,
of applicants you've had. Because I've wondered about this recently too, with the reality, I guess, with the availability of AI to write things like a cover letter or a resume, and now you being the employer, much like many that will listen to this, are there any Damian Stevens gut instincts or tells that you have been able to deduce even through just, again, the volume of looking at things to help discern or separate um, a meaningful document, and that one probably not the right word choice, right? But like it passes the sniff test as potentially being real rather than just another fabricated AI submission.
Yeah, I'll answer that slightly differently, maybe, because I don't know. One of the early gates in our hiring test is we ask you three things, and one of those is tell me something you're passionate about. It can be anything, and so free form, you write back. Some people write 3 lines, and some people write 3 pages, and we're hoping for something in between. My point was it AI, either generated or augmented. In fact, for this position, I kind of expected we would really attract a lot of that, and there was no letdown there. And I'm sure we could have had the arms race of you try to generate something and we try to see if it is, and then you try to get around it. But I think there were people that what I want for myself is what I want for my team, which is you own the output. And so whether it's your resume, reply to a ticket, how you phrase something in an email or on the website, like you own the output. If you committed that code, you also own the output. You can use AI to code now, right? Whatever it is, you still own the output. And so there were definitely people that came across as passionate and others that didn't. And I don't mind. In fact, I kind of expect you're using, AI tools to help you craft your resume. But
Sure.
it should really be your experience that you're talking about and still sound passionate, not monotone. And especially like that one. It wasn't like, tell me about something amazing you've done at work. It's like, tell me something. Like you could be passionate about ice cream or skateboarding or, stamp collecting. Like we get all kinds of interesting responses and to things I usually know very little about. But you should be passionate about something. So that was kind of the first, one of those. And I think, a few years ago, pre-AI, a lot of that was just because most of the positions are customer facing and the ability to put together reasonably grammatically correct sentences was, an important thing. Now with AI, you could have completely broken thought patterns and still have it spit out these great paragraphs. So, but it's also just a gate because so many people don't respond. They just blast it out like volume, right? And we're not looking for volume. We're looking for somebody that really wants this opportunity and why. And that's the other thing that struck me is I think it's a continuum we continue to work on, but we must have gotten a good bit better in this job description because I've never had more people show up on the video call saying, I feel like you wrote this for me. You stopped. Every other job description sounds the same. You stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, I've got to work here. Yeah. And that's exactly the kind of emotion, not for everybody, but for the right person I want to invoke.
Yeah. What's fascinating about that, and I know we talked about it at length on our previous calls on this, so people can go watch that for the real unpacking, but it's the emotional inversion that you were able to unlock in how you wrote that job description that allowed the individuals then to self-identify and change the emotional investment, if you will, in what your process was for the hiring too, which had to have just been very fulfilling, but also rewarding as the interviewer, talking to people who weren't just in the room because like you clicked one button to let them get there. We talked also about how you introduced certain elements of friction in your process, and that friction in this case also caused those same individuals not to self-eject, but to lean in even further, right? So I'm interested, maybe either high level or low level, what you've discovered this time going through that same process, but specifically with the introduction of friction and positioning, like the language you were using for this kind of hire that you've never hired before, and how you felt like that gave you this candidate pool, which we'll dive into momentarily, that has really reshaped what is possible for your business.
Yeah. So there's there's what we've done before that's worked well, and that is we have a very deliberate multi-step hiring process that is designed to attract people, and they may be unconventional. And most job postings, unknowingly, they miss that part of the market. That's about 20% of the market. It's more in technical jobs, but just about 20% of people are in some way unconventional, whether they realize that or not. And we've always written descriptions to attract those kinds of people that are trying to go from 0 to 1, people that are trying to do things that basically nobody's done before. And so we've had these multiple friction steps, and they can be too much. Like, we don't want you to do months of work before you start here, but there can be too little. What was different this time is really, I would say, two things. I used AI in a way as kind of a thinking partner, and we took some of our job descriptions and said, this is what we've done before. Here's our culture. Here's our values, that sort of thing. And that helped. But more specifically, I literally spoke about what I wanted, the outcomes, and then I saw what it, and turned my voice into not only transcription, but through the LLM, had it come back and kind of write a version. And normally I would probably write between 3 and 5 versions and then say, okay, that's good enough. I've put enough time into it. It's not that I don't want to put more, but there's always this time element of other things I need to do. But this allowed me to rapidly iterate, and I didn't have to necessarily bug a team member to really review every iteration. And so there was really 2 outcomes because of that. One is it really distilled our core values even further into the job description. And 2, what people commented on when I finally got to speak with them, Jeffrey, was this spoke to me because they called out 2 things. They said, number one, they didn't say it in this order, but they said, you have like day 1 and day 30 and day 90 in the job description. Yep. And I love the clarity because you gave specific projects and you gave us what we need to do, and that excited them. And I think it's always exciting to have clarity, but especially given AI, right? Because I could easily, I'll just go ahead and confess, I could easily say I want to hire an AI person to do cool AI things, and I think it'll probably make some money one day. That's not specific, that's not measurable, and I'm probably going to spend a ton of money, even if I get a decent person, going in 42 directions and probably accomplishing little. And so I forced myself and kind of used AI as a thinking partner to codify and clarify what I wanted, and people resonated with, I love that when I start, before I even applied, I know what you expect in the first 90 days. I was hoping that would also help people deselect and not apply. Yeah. Right. And so I didn't get to speak to those people that didn't apply, but I believe that probably happened. And then the other thing people called out is we talked about increasing my productivity 600%, in the first 90 days as one of those outcomes. And again, I think the right people were like, yeah, I think that's possible. That fired me up, and their wheels started turning about how you could pull that off. And I think the wrong people thought, you can only improve 10% a year, or I can't imagine doing that.
Yeah. One of the things that I know to be true, one, through lived experience, I guess not one, but yes, through lived experience, especially when hiring and working with, and I don't remember which book it came out of, but it was essentially A players surround themselves with A players. I think that materializes and manifests a little bit differently, even in this last 5 years of evolution. But one thing that I've always experienced to be true is that individuals that you might classify as A players love the scoreboard. Now, the scoreboard can be different things, but it's still objective, right? In some cases on the sales side, most of the time that's like stack ranking, right? It's stack ranking with the quota. Where are you? Where do you stack up to your peers or to the rest of the people on the team or to the quota or to whatever? But the clarity, to one of the other words that you gave, and the visibility, and then almost the innate accountability to drive towards a number tends to unlock that capacity, whether that's discretionary effort or something else. So I'm not surprised that something that might look as ambitious as 600% on paper isn't something that shut down the, in this case, right kind of candidate that you were looking for, which is like, while that might be a large, ambitious percentage, what we want out of this role is an asymmetric upside. And by the way, when we solve it for this, every other problem down the line is also going to be sort of that higher stakes, higher volume, higher impact. Maybe not numerically, but intentionally designed this way, right? Because that's what the automation component is for. So it's good to hear that, of the whatever, let's call it 200 probably applicants, you got down to 30 video phone calls. From those 30 video phone calls, then we didn't really dive into much of those conversations because of timing on the last conversation. What surprised you most out of the ones that made it from that first round of 30 to where you actually got to the point where you've had some projects built for you at this point as part of that friction in the process?
Yeah. Great questions. And even it was the first time I spoke with them, I wouldn't really call it first round because we have a few gates of review in terms of
Sure.
Can you respond in this way and will you do this? And even some assessments and other things before the first time to speak with that individual. And then, so we had 30 really good. I did 30 really good. And I had another teammate join me for them. And there's a lot of people that I think they go, wow, I spent about half hour on each. They're like, I don't know if I want to spend 15 hours on just that one stage. But it fits with my philosophy, which is I'm always betting on your trajectory. Where are you going? Not necessarily where have you been. And especially in this day and age, people that think outside the box, that are what I would call unconventional. And then now you're leveraging tools that have not existed. In some cases, one of the candidates built something with an MCP server that's been out about 8 months. Other things have been out weeks. None of this has been out for 5 years, right? This is all relatively new. And so the ability to look past, I think, was key and also part of what helped people lean forward. And I'm not saying like look past in terms of like you had a dark past as much as just we didn't say you need a 4-year degree and X years. And in fact, one of the guys that interviewed with me noticed a pattern that mostly held true, which is it seemed we had a good number of the folks that we interviewed that already are working in AI. They have full-time jobs working in AI. And then we had a good portion that did not. And it was, I don't know if it was even, maybe it was close to even. I was surprised because we required no experience in AI. And, but we found that the pattern you notice is it seemed like the people that already had that job were just kind of happy where they were and their trajectory had slowed. And they just wanted to kind of, I don't know that I'd use the word coast, but not really push the envelope. And then you have the people that were just, they can't help but think about it. They're building stuff in the nights and the weekends and they're thinking about this and they're not only following the news, they're taking action. And that's what, that was probably the thing that stood out, was that. And so we had about 30 video calls and there was probably half of that I wanted to invite. And then we decided to, after a lot of deliberation, to invite 7 to do this project. So probably part of the mental labor was just getting down to 7 from the 30 video calls. And then the other is, how do we give you a project? My goal was, I want a project that's going to let you show off. And not in an arrogant way, but like show your skills, be unique, because we can talk about it, but there's execution. But I didn't want to give projects that were 1 month, 2 month projects. I didn't want to give you, because the other part of the project just is it's time bound. So to be specific, we said, hey, we sent an email to the final 7 at end of day Friday, 6 p.m. And said, okay, great. If you'd like to go to the next stage, here's this. And I sent a list of 5 projects they could choose from, or if they want to create their own, I asked them to tell us what that would be to see if it would fit with what we're doing at all. But it was very time bound. We sent it out. They didn't know there was a project, and we sent them an email saying there's a project, and we gave them until Wednesday. So from Friday to Wednesday, to execute on that. And a lot of the work, frankly, that went into those were what's valuable to us, what might be interesting to them, what is on the edge of possible in that time frame. Because I didn't want to get, like, there's a few things I was like, it wouldn't be bad to have a nice prompt that after this conversation that you and I have today, Jeffrey, really gives me the talking points, helps me digest that, and maybe share that post with people on social media or with friends that want to know, like, how do I get the nuggets out of this? Like, you could customize a prompt. Right. But anybody worth their salt, that's not going to take even an afternoon. And so part of our challenge is, how do we not give you, gigantic projects, months of work, but how do we give you something to really sink your teeth in? So that's part of why we gave them so many different projects, some of which, like one of them was create a voice agent that takes phone calls 24/7 as like the emergency support and can actually handle those things, speak with you. One of our principles is tell you when it's AI, not try to, even though it may sound human, even though it might fake out some people, like that's not our goal. And so identify that we are, and this is what we're doing, and we're helping in this way. But that tied into our pager duty and our CRM and all those sort of things to notify, our team 24/7. And being a disaster recovery company, we always try to think about, we want our humans there, but we want scalability, because just like an MSP, if 5% of your clients call, you can handle that. If 100% of your clients call, for some reason, you just can't handle those sort of things. So, kind of in the spirit of not only 24/7, but in, handling peak and other things and getting to you more quickly. So one of them, for example, was building a voice agent. So you might be more inclined there. Others were ticket triage. We can talk more about the projects in a moment, but a lot of the work, I think, was how do we give you something meaningful that you might be excited about that will actually create value? Because there's the other thing, I could come up with things that are tangential or fun. And I think we wanted fun and creates value. And and again, not be impossible, but not be so easy. And that's, given the state of AI changing so frequently, like what was impossible last month is now pretty easy. So, we pulled those together, and it was 7 people that we shared this with. And that's right there, after I shared it, is when everything started to change for me.
How so? Actually, let's start with how so. But the one question I have right off the gate is you tasked 7 people with the opportunity to participate in a project. How many of the 7 fulfilled or took the opportunity?
So surprisingly, 7 out of 7. There's one quick, funny one. One of the candidates that I was like, they were all really good, but I had a few that I thought were going to be the best. And one of those that I was like, they really seemed like they wanted it, didn't respond. Well, actually, more accurately, they asked a question before the deadline. And then I was traveling at the PAX 8 event. I bumped into you. And so I was traveling, and, when I got a chance, I responded. And so I responded to that person, and they not only never responded, they didn't actually submit anything by the deadline. I just want to confess this. As somebody that's hiring, when you're dealing with what started as hundreds of applicants and then 15 hours in video calls, and then you're traveling to an event, and that, just the busyness of work and life and family, I could have just easily missed that. And this isn't about me, but my point is, I said to my team, let's go look. And we looked, and my response didn't go into the applicant tracking system. And it's just like your ticket system. Every response is supposed to go in there. And so I said, look, if mine didn't, then maybe they responded and theirs didn't. Right. So I just reached out to them and I said, hey, super sad that you know, especially when you asked the question, because they said they were working on it, that you
Sure.
didn't. And they were like, oh my gosh, no, I did. And the thing that was telling is like, you know, 5 minutes later, a full project, right? So you could tell they
Okay.
had it ready
Yeah.
and that they did. It's just technology glitch
Yeah.
could have led us
Yeah.
to miss an incredible person. And one more thing, an incredible person that already did a lot of work.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so it turns out it was 7 out of 7. At first we thought it was 6 out of 7.
Yeah. Well, no, it's fascinating there too. It reminds me of one of my MSPs along the way. We had a core value that was start from a place of trust. And it was built for those moments, right? We
Yeah.
live in a world where we're catching falling daggers left and right all the time, no matter what. Communication is like a bunch of different mediums. And in a world where you're in a back and forth communication like that, that's digital even, whether it's a text message or an email or something, there's so much vacant space that almost always, I hate absolutes, but like human nature tends to fill the vacant space with the shadows or like the negative side rather than dispelling it with light, so to speak. And so in a technical MSP scenario, that was one of those things just like that, where it's like the client email back and forth or the technician's email or text message or Teams message, whatever it was, can be perceived as, oh, they must not care, or they're always too busy, or insert any sort of negative thing there. Whereas the truth, the facts, the reality of it is the technology failed and both parties still had a high level of interest and engagement and desire. And so you can default back to something like start from a place of trust. And at that same MSP, we also built our world off of what we called the pick up the phone and call, right? Like,
Yep.
just go find out, like pick up the phone and call and ask the question, like, hey, I'm bummed that you didn't submit, you know, is everything go? Did you get my email? Like anything could be true. And then to your result, you ended up getting not only the response, but the response and the deliverable. So I thought that was important to highlight. It's really easy to get busy, and busy is
Yeah.
a really good excuse
Yeah. Well,
to just like let it go.
the other thing is, I think, you know, a lot of people go, well, I'm the one hiring. I have all the power. And I don't really see it that way. You know, I see this like how I want to work with good partners and good people is like we're bringing different gifts to the table. And, and so that's, you know, we already had plenty of other applicants, plenty of other, all these things all these projects were built to review. So it's not like I was looking for more time or looking to spend more time, but what clued me in is my response didn't get sucked into the system, right? Just like a ticket. So if mine didn't go in, then they probably never got it. And that could have meant theirs didn't. And, you know, I reached out and they're like, oh my gosh, I totally did, you know, that kind of thing. They were really freaking out. And they even like had like sent a screenshot of like their sent mail, you know, or whatever.
Yep.
And, but I have never opened that because I told them, I said, I believe you. Like I saw where mine didn't, and I reached out and I saw their motivation. And then also, what are the odds that within a couple of minutes of me sending that, you had the whole project ready and
They
can
have the
respond?
project done.
You know?
Yeah. I think the other point I'd like to make on your behalf, in what you were able to demonstrate through that situation also is like who you are and how you are as the employer in that like pre-hired scenario, right? Where there's, even if it's just a communication issue, like how you're going to show up if this person was to be selected as the collaborative partner or employer in a scenario where there may or may not be a communication issue or some other, you know, gap or issue, which as a both an employer but also the employee kind of going through that process, I would actually learn more and take more from how you handled that one little scenario versus anything else. And the way that you handled it would also cause me to want to lean in further to like what I'm going to produce in that project. So wanted to highlight that because I think like that's the point of start from a place of trust. It's not to just write it off and move off to the next thing, but it's really to like force all of us to slow down a bit and like
That's right.
go back to our roots of being human and make that connection and be meaningful, especially in a scenario where this individual had put the time, energy, and effort into creating the thing. But had you just walked away like, oh, they blew it off, it must not have been important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're sort of stuck holding that project too, would have left a drastically different impression on who
Yeah.
Damien is or Servosity or any of that. So I think that's the part that shouldn't get overlooked as well in the process.
Yeah. And I think it's easy to have that bias because you're like, you got to be on your A game when you're interviewing. And everybody, shows up that way. But like you said, especially whether it's email or text or whatever it is, like it's just easy to miss it. And that's what I want to model like I did. And my point is I have had people that just didn't engage in a project or in prior times. And sometimes I've reached out. I'm like, hey, did you? And they're like, oh, I didn't. Something came up kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, right. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Even in this one, a different one of the 7, they responded and they turned in a really good project. But they also said, I had this completely unforeseen personal event in my life. So you gave us like 4 days, but I had to do this in 1. And so that I appreciate that, right? They didn't, they didn't ask for more time. They didn't complain. They just said, I did this. And I look at that and said, look, what they produce in a day instead of 4. So yeah. And then, I don't know where you want to start, but this is where the learnings really started hitting. It's like, wow, this is powerful.
Yeah. Let's go right there now, because now you've seen the results of what could be created in less than 4 days, let's call it, with little notice behind that too. So like all of it from the ideation to the creation to the execution and the delivery all happened inside that window. And you even positioned it in such a way where them choosing which one or what they took on to submit would be revealing as well. So why don't we start going through some of those things that you did learn, have learned, but didn't expect to learn, and just start almost codifying that experience through the journey too.
Yeah. So I have bias. And what I mean by that is we generally are looking for those really driven people, and we're looking for unconventional people, and we're doing assessments to help us understand this. And so we have an amazing team. I was telling my team, I'm used to, if it can be done in 6 months by mere mortals, my team could do it in 4, and all this, all this sort of things. And I am actively building things myself in AI and using AI as a lever. So I see the leverage, and I'm building workflows and automations and a little bit of tinkering with agentic swarms of agents and all kinds of things. So it's not that I'm sitting on the sidelines. I'm not just chatting even. I'm building a lot of the things like they're talking about. But I say this as a precursor to say I was blown away. I'm used to hiring amazing people, and I know how fast AI is progressing, and I thought I had a pretty good understanding. But here's the main thing. They were given 4 days. Depending on the project, some of these were, I don't know, at least 2 weeks, maybe a month of work, I think. Some of them were more doable in 4 days, and others were far less. And so that project and what they chose was telling. Every single one of them executed on a project, made it work, produced a video demo of it. Many of them submitted the code. But here was the thing. What really blew me away is 2 out of the 7 decided to do more than one project. And at the end of the day, those 2 did more than I thought would happen in the first 90 days. And they did it in whatever time they had in 4 days.
Sure.
So I've never been in a spot where we've given real tangible work. And look, understand it's prototype, probably needs some additional, polishing, right? I understand those sort of things. But to produce the depth and quality of some of the things that were produced, because there was a few of those, I was like, well, there was a couple projects, frankly, if somebody chose that project, I was like, they're going to write back and be like, well, here's 30 or 60% of it. And, take a look or something. And I was like, you're going to that's going to be the wrong one to pick. And I didn't do that on purpose. There were ones that we need and they're interesting. And, you
Sure.
know, what I also
Yeah.
realize is your passion will guide you, and you might already be building or tinkering in an area that you know more about. So
Yeah.
the main takeaway is just 2 out of the 7 candidates, and that doesn't mean that these will be the 2, but 2 out of the 7 they all blew me away in the quality and that they all engaged. But 2 out of the 7 blew me away, and like, wow, I thought I knew what we could do, and with a little, with a polish or two, like, you've done more. You've done more, and so one of them did 2 projects. The other candidate did 4 out of the 5 projects.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. We sent it out around 5 or 6 p.m. on a Friday. This person replied about noon Saturday, so less than 24 hours later, and submitted the code for all 4 projects. So in less than 24 hours, that person did more than I thought we could pull off in 90 days.
Right.
And I can't tell you how powerful that is, kind of to change my mindset, because I am not disconnected, in terms of what AI can do. I'm building myself. I'm tinkering with it. I'm actively engaged in what others are building. And these were not theoretical. These were like, here's problems we have, and
Yeah.
can you build something? And so much so, like, they surprised me that I thought, well, we'll look at the video, we'll see what it looks like. We'll kind of think through not just what did you deliver, but how did you think about the problem? And did you ask questions to clarify that problem? And how did you get at what you were building? And I thought that's how we would do it. And that's how we've done things. For example, the closest to this kind of interviewing is not necessarily like technical support or sales or marketing, but more like software development. So we have
Sure.
developers, and often we'll ask them to build something, and then we look at like the actual code they shipped, but we look at the quality of thought, the architecture. Why did you do this? Why did you choose this pattern or database or, whatever, fill in the blank. So I'm kind of used to that. What I was blown away by is how much and the quality of that, and kind of going above, not just in like, as an individual, I went above, but I'm blown away that how could somebody execute on this? And remember, we didn't even tell them there was going to be a project, let alone a single detail about a project, until we sent them all the same thing at the same time. So for somebody to do in less than 24 hours, 90 days of work, boom, like mind blown. Like my frame of reference is totally gone.
Are you able to talk through or talk about, to whatever extent you can, actually, like what the 5 problems the 5 options they had to choose from, what they were, and then after that, maybe we can start drawing some aggregation around it too, right? Like, where did you see some overlap where most chose this, or in the case where one did 4 of the 5, they obviously chose 4 of the 5, but what were the 4 problems that you posed? And then to whatever extent you can discuss the types of solutions that were presented back to you that got you thinking.
Yeah. So what I could talk about that a little bit more. And I'm happy to, if you guys want, I can share that document that we sent out to them and said, here's those 5 problems. If anybody would like it, just drop a comment, and those sort of things. But maybe it might be interesting to share what people responded to or what they built. Maybe as a frame of like what's possible. But, and then, I have like some crib notes right here on like what the 7 individuals built. And so, if that makes sense, I'm happy to dive in.
Yeah, because I think up to this point, at least, anyone who's only watched this Building in Public series from you, we've talked about how we got to this point and why you chose to go down this path. But even to your own experience of what you just shared, where it's like, I never knew that this was possible. I want to try to turn on as many light bulbs as we can for people who maybe they're not as close to AI, they're not as close to building, they're not as close to problem solving, even as you or I are. And so odds are by just walking through what was done in that one experiment in 4 days by 7 different individuals will hopefully be some shock therapy into people to maybe get off their heels a little and lean into thinking about exploring, even if it's just personally, what is possible.
Yeah, and if you want that document, let me know, because we put several paragraphs into each, and we didn't tell them how to build it, but we said these are the kind of things we want. Try to be specific enough that you could build it, but also not so detailed to tell you how to build it and leave room for interpretation and questions. So maybe we'll talk through this, and maybe this will help you open up what can be done. So the first one I want to talk about, the first candidate, just in no particular order. We said, look, we have tickets just like MSPs. The first one was a ticket triage system, and what are we doing and how are we going to do that? And so that's what the first one built. They said, look, I'm going to build an AI that can just hook into your existing systems, communicate through it without any human intervention, do this triage completely autonomously. So there's no copy and paste in another system. But this is also where I think human in the loop really matters. So what I mean is we're not just going to auto respond with AI. We're going to, think of this as like a draft email, right? So it can triage all the tickets for the morning and tell you what's most important, and even, prepare either this is what you need to look into further or a response. So the first one, they built the infrastructure for autonomous ticket triage and AI agents that are communicating autonomously. They use something called Model Context Protocol, which is about 8 months old. So again, most of this stuff is new. And the other thing I want to stress really, really clearly as well is this is a great one. We were like, cool, we want to give you our tickets to triage. The problem is these people don't work for us. Mm-hmm. We don't have anything about, so we can't give you access to our ticket system, that sort of thing. We thought about giving you like a subset of tickets with scrub data. But frankly, because we have so many things going on, we decided, let's do this. We'll tell you the kind of system, and you can go and interface with that system. You can put some dummy data in it, which made the task a little harder than handing them that. So we weren't trying to make it harder for them, but we also realized we weren't going to just tee up like a cloned instance of our ticketing system with sanitized data in it. Knowing that when you're on the team, we'll have the privacy and the other things where we can actually let you have access to things like that. So if anybody's listening, we didn't know. Well, I am crazy. I wasn't crazy enough to say, here, open up the kimono and go wild. So, think about that. We all have tickets. And look, maybe you just buy that. Maybe you don't build that. Okay, fine. Sometimes you should buy, most of the time probably, instead of build. But we knew this is possible, and we knew it was an issue that will save our team time. And it's one of the things that our support team wants, one of the higher things. So to build that, he built it using agent-to-agent communication protocols and all sorts of other things that turned a concept into kind of production-ready system. And again, 3-4 days, something like that.
Yeah, right.
Right. So pretty crazy. And I thought some of these, I don't know how to say that. I thought that one might not sound as fun, the ticket triage, but that person jumped into it. The second one, they built a voice first emergency response. So what I mean by that is you can dial a phone 24/7 and an AI agent will answer. It sounds like a human. If we didn't tell you, you wouldn't know. It classifies the emergencies. It creates tickets, provides real-time dashboards, hooks into CRM. Our engineers are on call, so actually uses pager duty. And we had, it wasn't as simple as it sounds, because we said, look, we want to make sure the customer's always taken care of. Sometimes people call at 10 p.m. because it's just convenient and they just want to log a ticket. And you can be there and just log a ticket and you don't have to page the engineer. But we'd rather default to failing the other way, right? Instead of, missing an emergency. And so there's logging and telemetry and testing and things that had to go into that. So that was, like, you can wire up the basics of that pretty quickly, but like that, there's a lot into that. And I don't think a lot of people realize, like, you can, the AI can answer phone calls and do those things, as you know. And they built an end-to-end solution with a live demo with an actual call being processed, showing it, handling the different scenarios, emergency, non-emergency, which systems to be, like, for example, it wouldn't use PagerDuty, but would still use the log a ticket in either scenario. Yeah. Even ones of like spam calls, because we didn't want to pager engineer at 2 a.m. type of thing. So, they did that. They produced documentation, a live demo, and a dashboard in 4 days. Right. So just think about the level of complexity and the level of thought required to do that. And it doesn't have to be that. Like, you can do that for your support. You can do that for sales. Like, look, here's a challenge. Google the name of some MSP in your area, or, just Google MSP in your city. Call 10 of them. If more than half answer the phone when you dial sales, please let me know you have an unusual city. Like, the thing is MSPs were horrible at picking up the phone, right? So my point is, I would rather a human pick it up. If they don't, like, the way we had this is say, hey, I'm a helpful assistant. Like, it's not a human. And this is what I'll do. Like, I can go ahead and book an appointment if you'd like. I can have them call you back. I can send information. There's just things like that. And my point is, somebody built something more complex than that with the emergency response system in 4 days. Should I keep going on a few more? What would you love to hear?
Yeah, keep going. Because I think what was built is going to be the most valuable piece for people now, just as an idea thing.
Another thing we all have, a knowledge base. The other thing, if you've had a knowledge base for your tickets for clients to look, you have wrong information. And so do we, right? It got outdated. This has changed. This is deprecated. Everything from MFA is optional to, like, no, it's not. Like, there's just wrong information in there. And so the third candidate, they built and deployed a complete knowledge-based analysis agent. This is a person that had a constraint, so they had 1 day to do it. The good news is our knowledge base is public. It's out there. So we were like, literally, we don't have to give you anything. Just do it. And so they built an agent that doesn't just run once, but it can run regularly. And the reason it matters is we're all resource constrained. We would like to fix those things. So we had it go through, and basically it went through every page, every knowledge base, and it ranked which ones seemed to be right, which ones seemed to be the most wrong, and which ones are somewhat questionable. And that way we knew, like, these are highly wrong and highly out of date. And what's funny is we didn't give them, like, a source of truth, but they were able to find conflicting, depending on when you read our knowledge base. These things, they don't align. And obviously we don't want that, right? So that's a great example of two things. Number one, they've created value for us, whether or not they ever work here. Two, who couldn't use that, right? Who wouldn't like their knowledge base to be more accurate? It helps the client more. Maybe you get a few less tickets. We all hate it when we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that knowledge base article is wrong. We got to go rewrite that. And this could even give us a draft rewrite if we'd like to say this is what we think is right. We didn't point it at a lot of sources of truth. If we'd given it our internal tickets or internal knowledge bases, it could have gone further. But that person had some personal constraints, so it did that in 1 day. It would have taken longer than that to read through the knowledge base if we'd have hired you and said, go through it. And, sometimes that's what gets handed to you. You're a brand new support person. You're like, hey, go look at our knowledge base and kind of get familiar with what we do and point out some things.
Yeah, here's ConnectWise University. Have fun.
Yeah, that's right. Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
The fourth candidate is kind of the, okay, I actually misspoke. They were the triple threat. So there was somebody that did more than 3, but this one did 3.
Okay.
So they built something that fixed the knowledge base. They built the 24/7 phone agent and considering what Servosity does, we said, look, I think we could help MSPs more. Let's build a website where if you give them, if an MSP puts in a customer's domain, it'll go out and do a deep research style report. And based on the industry, look at how many employees they have, look what the industry is, and help prepare a report for like either a prospect meeting or a QBR around the actual cost of downtime. Because as we talk to MSPs, they don't really know. And so here you are telling the cost of delivering backup and business continuity and disaster recovery planning, or all the things that we need to deliver, security. Why should you invest in security? Why should you invest in backup and DR? And the client doesn't always understand it. So we said, look, this is something we think could be valuable to any MSP. We'd love to offer that. So, database system analysis, integration, and built that. And that produces a report in a minute or two that you can consume. And that person built 3 projects in the 4-day. So, when I started seeing more than one, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this is like that, those 3, that would have been, if they'd have done that in the first 90 days, the ROI would have been there. Mm-hmm. The 4th one, they decided to do this in a little bit different way, but they created a kind of a business intelligence tools that helps turn sales conversations into data and to help MSPs. And so, they asked in the questions, we leverage a lot of AWS. So some people did this in a more, I'll just use some automation tools, N8N, Zapier,
Sure.
Make.com, et cetera. And this one built out full like AWS infrastructure, like S3 hosting, CloudFront, functions, databases, like enterprise infrastructure delivered, built out. So from 0 to deployed in the 4 days. And they admitted that like they knew some of it, but they had learned half the things they built, at least the kind of AWS cloud side of it. Yeah. But to think through it and actually go for not just a prototype when we were just asking for a prototype and build out like enterprise grade architecture, like we would still review it. There's security things, that we'll go through, but like you look at that and I go, man, once we pass that through security and this or that, it's probably done. It's probably shipped to production. It can handle, significant scale. Yeah. Let's see, the 6th person, this was one of my challenges I asked them to do, which is productivity. So this goes back to how do you spend your time, right? And my thing is, if you show me your calendar, I know it's important to you. And I try to live by that. And one of my biggest questions is like, what's the most useful thing I can do with my time? Do I help another partner? Do I coach a teammate? Do I create this thing that creates value? And so I've been in a program by Dan Martell, and he's got a book called Buy Back Your Time. And if you read that book, which is a great book, I recommend, he talks about you should consider doing a time and energy audit, not just time, but energy. Does it give or drain energy? And just go through your schedule. How am I spending my time? Like if you're in sales, or if you're an owner that needs to be in sales, how much of that's on sales? And if you need to be focused more on operational details instead of or operational process instead of sucked into the details, like where are you spending your time? And it's team meeting, then it's this, and it's all the things, email, all the things that compete for our time and energy. And so I've done those manually, or asked my executive assistants to do those. Go through my calendar at like 15-minute granularity and tell me where I spent the time in the last 2 weeks. And then I would go through and assign like a dollar sign, like not that's worth $50, but like kind of $1 to $4 signs. How valuable is that? Mm-hmm. And because if it's replying to email, it's probably $1 sign. But if it's, creating this, we're solving a problem that one of our clients needed, that's probably, $3 or $4 signs. If that's something they needed, even if it doesn't pay directly, I'm just saying it's value there. And so it's very manual. So, and we added a little bit more to what we wanted to do that to align with your work and even your spiritual priorities. And this person built that, created a master control panel, analytics dashboard, kind of an enterprise user interface, and a return on investment calculator. which was not even what we asked
Yeah.
for. So you could literally take this tool, connect your calendar to it, and it can tell you, are you, and it's not this isn't to shame you. It's just to say, if you think you want to work on this will tell you, are you, and how much your time is really spent on it. And now I can take that from a once every 6 months to a real time. Am I doing week over week what I think I'm doing? And am I making the time to spend in an area that I've committed? Man, as a leader, that is so hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the other truth is, once every 6 months for me, because my executive assistant did it. And a couple of times my team members did it, and they liked it, and they realized some things gave them energy that drained mine, and vice versa. And we had some really good discussions from that. But now it's like everybody could do this and have this information at their fingertips. And then the kind of saved one of the most interesting for last. They're the one that built 4 agents in less than 1 day. And let's see, they created basically most of the things that are said there, like the calling agent, the buying back your time calendar agent, the ticket triage. Then they also created a network security testing capability, pen testing AI automated, ethical hacking with Tor integration. And then they integrated local models and uncensored models to deal with privacy. Also let it, a lot of the other models won't do nefarious things. And so if you're really trying to pen test and test your own security, or maybe you want to do this for a client, but in our case, we were like, how can we continuously test our security and vulnerabilities and just anything like that? And how could we approach this like a hacker might, or a hacker using AI might? So they built all those things plus that and turned it in less than a day. Submitted like, some of them just submitted video, but the ones that did multiple ones, they like turned in the code. Here it is. So I literally brought my team out. I was like, look, I mean, you have multiple code
like,
bases, all
gut
architecture.
check this. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, they returned it so quickly. I was actually on the plane flying out to that event, and traveling with somebody, and they're like, "How?" I had a code editor open that you can use AI, and they're like, "Are you on the airplane Wi-Fi?" And I wasn't. I was like, "No, I'm just like reviewing their code." And my point around that is that I am not a great developer, but like I just wanted to see what they built and what their thought process was, and you can see what prompt they used, and just there's a lot of interesting stuff. So, I see that Ron Opperman asked a question. Did we help the candidates that didn't make the cut find a position? We've informed them so far. If there's anybody that's interested, we'd love to. Most of the people told us, no. In fact, several of them said, I think everybody's going to be hiring for this kind of role in 6 months, but we don't see many people doing this. So we seem to attract like this group of people that weren't quite senior enough for certain roles, and maybe they're overqualified to be your chat GPT copy paster, type of person that can develop the prompt a little bit. So I would love to. I always want this to be a win-win-win. And so if there's anybody that's looking for candidates like this, because we went from hundreds down to 30 video calls, and we've gone down to 7 that have developed these projects. Odds are all 7 of these are rock stars. And I can't hire 7, at least not yet. I plan to hire multiple, but I have 1 role open. And just last note, I'd love to get your questions, Jeffrey, is some people are like, I would never go on 30 video calls, about half an hour each, 15 hours on just that one stage. But I said, first of all, I knew getting into that when we had to kind of open our aperture to a broader range of people. But I learned on every single one. There's always some interesting things that people are doing. So while I was there to interview, I also was there to learn.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating through the lens of what you knew going in that you would have to give, which would be the time. And oftentimes that's the way we look at those situations. It's like, this is going to cost me 15 hours of time. I could be doing so many other things. and not looking at what you can get through the experience, especially when the topic is AI or automation or anything of literally like as close to boots on the ground real time experience you could be tapping into from people who are insanely passionate about it. And so there was a we personally talked together about asymmetric upside. So the asymmetric upside of 15 hours of your time to have your worldview as the leader of not even just one business but multiple businesses. Uh, now you can think back how you turn that into the outcome or the impact or the result, whatever the way you wish to measure it is, depending on the organization, because your worldview, because your thinking, because your possibilities, because your vision, or because of your integration has all shifted now as a result of 15 hours of eye-opening conversation with people who are closer to a thing than anyone else that you've talked to or that you've experienced. And so it's, again, kind of changing your relationship with how you approach a situation, going back to the one that had the technology miscommunication even of, you can look at it as you're going to waste 15 hours talking to people who you could easily have one of your other coworkers or peers or whatever handle for you. Or you could look at it through this lens of, what can I gain? All right. Or how can I enrich the experience to ensure that you maximize the benefit to yourself from it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I wanted to do it selfishly because I knew I would learn. And I think if it was if I had a CTO hiring them or something else, but I was hiring them. And my point is, I'm already building a lot of the things. I'm doing some of that. I'm close enough to the action. Like, I'm not far enough removed that I don't understand the terminology, and I'm going to work with them directly. And so I had a teammate join me because, more than one set of eyes is a wonderful to get different perspectives. But I was like, I do believe you get out what you put in, especially when it comes to that hiring process. And to me, it goes back to kind of first principles. If I care about my team and the culture, then probably the biggest thing I could do would be very, very intentional about how we hire and who we let on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you go from here? What's the next step? What can those tuning back in expect to kind of hear about when we regroup in a couple weeks?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And then Matt just asked a question that I'll kind of answer both of these. He said, now that all the projects are submitted, do you have a rubric to standardize how you'll compare them? What will be the deciding factor? How are you going to pick the new hire? So that's what I want to talk about by the time we talk next. Yeah. And hopefully we'll have the final interviews either scheduled or completed. And we'll unpack some of those things. It's not who did the most projects. It's not who picked the one hardest project. It's in the projects, I think, will help to separate a little bit if you just had a tenuous grasp on something versus if you were better at it. But it's everything we've done, from the interviews we've already done to how you responded to the challenge, to how you responded to emails, to the assessments. And frankly, I don't think it's going to be easy to narrow down from these 7 to 3 or 4 or whatever number we do for a final interview. And so I mean that in both ways. Like, it's going to be hard. And I don't mean like somebody should feel bad for me. It's going to be hard because I want to make the right decision, but it's going to be hard because I think we have a really exceptional batch of people. And so, like, part of me wants to give everybody that, so we'll have all those things, and either final interviews kind of going through them, or maybe even past that at that point. And as I talk with these folks, one thing that occurred to me, if you'd like to know more, like, I haven't asked if I can tell you more details about who they are or share any of the examples of what they built or code. And so I haven't. I've talked about it at a high level, but depending on their answers to that, maybe we could share some of the things they built or share who they are, especially for those folks that are, please drop me a note, comment, or DM me if you're looking for somebody like this, because I can't hire all 7. So I would love to connect you to the right person, if that's something you're interested in. And I can guarantee you that I'm going to want to hire I don't know if I want to hire all 7, but I guarantee you already based on what's going on in these conversations, I'm going to want to hire more than one. They're going to be so good.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm looking forward to the next conversation, just like every other one. But I love this is what we're learning. This is what we're seeing piece of it.
Yeah.
Getting down to the wire with that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you guys for your time and attention. And man, this change in 100X, I'm super excited about. And I look forward to the next stage.
Yeah. We'll see y'all next time.
See you guys.